A little more confirmation we need, but this is exactly what I was looking and hoping for. People always say, what will be the catalyst for the next bull market? And in this case, maybe it's something that Bitcoin is actually built for that brings people back to the core narrative of why you were all here in the first place. I think Bessent now is saying what he has to say to prep everybody for a massive infusion of liquidity, right? And listen, maybe AI can help them grow their way out of it, but nothing is stopping it. I think that what Druckenmiller is saying is obvious. It just takes price going up all of a sudden for people to once again be talking about Bitcoin is digital gold, the debasement trade, all these things, and it's happening again right now. You can say that it was liquidated shorts that sent price up, but that only tells the story up to about 70 or 71. I'm highly encouraged that after that leverage was flushed once again, that we've stayed up. That is not trading money. Something changed.
That was Scott Melker, a market commentator with over 1 million subscribers and a daily show on Yahoo Finance. He also spent the last year as public enemy #1 of Bitcoin Treasury company fans for saying many of them were a terrible idea. He was mostly right. Today, he's officially flipped back to bullish. He says 125,000 is just a pit stop on the way to $1 million Bitcoin. This is Scott Melker on why he stopped trading and why now his top strategy is just to buy Bitcoin and chill. I'm your host, Rob Wallace. Welcome back to the Bitcoin News Channel. Let's get into it. All right, Mr. Scott Melker, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yes, well, what a time to have you on. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bullish are you?
I'll put it at 8.5.
Okay.
But I never know what the scale is. 1 like we're going to 0. Like is 1 like my friend Mike McGlone?
Yes,
and is 10 like, plan B at the peak of last cycle where, or Saylor saying 30 million by next year or something, right? So I don't know. I'm probably in the 7s or 8s. I think there's a little more confirmation we need, but this is exactly what I was looking and hoping for.
Yeah, and we'll get down to some of the metrics and chart lines in a little bit. But one thing I heard you say is that this feels like the Silicon Valley Bank bankruptcy, and how we blasted off of 19 to around 25 in a reaction to that. And now we've had this blast off from 62 to 79 in reaction to the Treasury market. So draw some parallels between the end of the last bear market and this one.
So it's interesting because people always say, what will be the catalyst for the next bull market? And the predictions are always wrong because it's always something unforeseen. And in this case, maybe it's something that Bitcoin is actually built for that brings people back to the core narrative of why you were all here in the first place, right? I mean, we talk about institutional adoption and strategic Bitcoin reserves and BlackRock and all those things that are built into the number go up technology, but that maybe aren't that exciting for a Bitcoin maximalist or someone who's here for freedom. And so I think that the unexpected catalyst that people still don't realize was a catalyst for the last bull market was the Silicon Valley Bank failure. Right. So you're in 2023. We'd been languishing, I think, in the depths of a bear market since basically FTX at the end of the year before. Bitcoin had gone down to the 15,000s, but to my memory, I don't remember specific lines on the chart, but, we were kind of just trading in the low 20s, high teens with very little interest and a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt as to the future of the industry. And then Silicon Valley Bank failed. And of course, soon after, Signature Bank was murdered on a Sunday. For no good reason, except for that they had built crypto rails. And we had this sort of existential crisis on the crypto side with Signature Bank as to what was going to happen. But Silicon Valley Bank had some unique properties, I think, that spurred the next sort of catalyst for a bull run. A is that they were obviously the bank for Circle, right? And so, or one of the banks. So I think, it was $3 billion out of the 30 billion-ish market cap. Once again, my numbers are going to be rounding because it's, I don't remember things exactly. Let's say 10% of their funds were sitting in Silicon Valley Bank. And there was literally this question, well, if, it's backed 1 for 1, if we lose 10%, is the value of USDC 90 cents and not $1, right? Is it going to depeg and head down? And so what a lot of people, including myself, did, not because I thought Bitcoin was going to go up, because I thought Bitcoin was safer, I converted whatever USDC I had into Bitcoin, right? Because we didn't know yet that the Fed was going to come in with the bazooka and say that we will backstop the entire banking system once again if we have to, which is why Bitcoin was created, right? And so, and luckily Bitcoin then jumped from, 18, 19 up to 24, 25. And I looked like a genius. But, at that time, it wasn't buying Bitcoin because it was going to go up. It was buying Bitcoin because it was safe. and because it was built for bank failures, and because it was built for, irresponsible fiscal and monetary policy and bank policy, and you know the rest of the story. So people don't look back, I think, and say Silicon Valley Bank was the beginning of that bull run, but it kind of was, because that's when it really started to catch another narrative. And then what happens is it just takes a narrative for the spark. And then maybe the leverage kicks in and you liquidate some shorts and price goes up. And then the magic of one big green candle is all of a sudden the things you were screaming about when price was down seem to matter to people. So it just takes price going up all of a sudden for people to once again be talking about Bitcoin is digital gold, the debasement trade, all these things, and it's happening again right now. So in my view, what just happened is Bessent made the announcement. The amount of money for the bond buybacks that he initially announced, doubling is a rounding error, insignificant. But the signal is that the Treasury is concerned about like long yields and is going to intervene if they get too high, right? It's not yield curve control, because that would be saying 5.2 is the pain point. We're going to do everything we can to defend 5.2. They didn't say that, even though they kind of imply it. And it's not money printing, because that happens at the Fed and it's coming from the Treasury general account. But no matter what you want to call it, it's intervention by the government with liquidity to defend something before it breaks, right? And that kind of, to me, rhymes with Silicon Valley. But more importantly, it's that Bitcoin jumped, liquidated a historic amount of shorts, sent it from the low 60s, let's call it, to 71, 72. I don't know when this will come out, but, then pushed it last night over 80, right? 81 something. And then you get a retracement. So you can say that it was liquidated shorts that sent price up, but that only tells the story up to about 70 or 71. The last 10 grand was a whole lot of people buying because either they're getting FOMO, they're getting excited, they're looking forward to another 4-year cycle, which could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, or because they finally went, oh yeah, Bitcoin is built for this, and that's why I want it. And now all of a sudden, Bitcoin is a conversation in the debasement trade again, only because price is up 20%.
Bitcoin is cool again. And yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that Bitcoin shines the most when it is seen as crisis money. The thing you fall back on when you see the rest of the system showing signs of real stress. And we saw that back in 2022 and 2023 with the Silicon Valley bankruptcy. And now once again with the Treasury Department saying, hey, we are very scared about the bond market, even with stocks at all-time highs. And I don't know, maybe we had just won too much over the last 2 years and got a little too fat and happy with the president and the Treasury companies. And now we needed something like this to bring us back.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it happens. And so listen, I mean, we in this industry, and I will extend that to crypto far beyond Bitcoin, but let's, for the sake of argument, call it one industry in the minds of many. We have the unprecedented ability to score own goals at the worst time, right? Or to shoot ourselves in the foot for absolutely no reason. And we do it over and over and over again. I would argue that this time it was Bitcoin treasury companies. I think I was probably the most unpopular and vocal proponent of that theory from the day that they started bubbling up after strategy. I still am a fan of strategy. But, I've often told the story that I walked into Bitcoin Vegas, a year and a half ago, and was pitched 7 of them in the first 10 minutes. And I looked around, I said, this is a terrible idea. I sat with Jack Mallers. I said, this is a terrible idea. Explain to me why this isn't a terrible idea. And they had good answers. And I said, these are going to all end up insolvent. Like, what happens? And he says, that's good. We'll just buy them all up. This is right when 21 launched. So obviously, that's not exactly what happened, but maybe that is the future. But our own goal was hubris. And on the backs of the ETFs, believing that there was going to be room for 100 leverage bets on Bitcoin and that somehow they were going to be worth, 20x the value of their, assets that they were holding. And well, here we are. And listen, I'm wrong about a lot of things, but that one just had the spidey senses tingling. And I think that is a big part of the story of this drawdown. Obviously, Trump being a gratuitous crypto grifter didn't help. And there are a number of other things, right? I think there was a certain price level at which even the most staunch defenders of Bitcoin from day one said, can I say bad words?
Yeah.
Said, holy shit, I'm fucking rich. And said, wow, I'm worth $20 billion in Bitcoin. I have kids and, maybe I should go sell $10 billion worth of that and go live out the rest of the days on a yacht. I think that, we saw those historic whale wallets that had never sold selling massively all the way down, into the 60s. And the fact is, we got to this point where every bottom signal that's ever existed in previous cycles started to exist. And once again, people were too emotional to see them. All the worst case scenarios didn't push Bitcoin down further, right? What was the worst case scenario of this cycle? Michael Saylor will sell Bitcoin. What happened when Michael Saylor sold Bitcoin? It went up.
Yeah.
Right? Even if only from 60 to 64, but Bitcoin went up and continued up. So I think, we're sitting pretty right now, but need some follow through.
And just a quick aside, did you get a lot of hate for speaking vocally against Bitcoin treasury companies?
I was like public enemy number one. I have a very, very strong tendency to main character myself for no apparent reason with Bitcoin Maximalist, but
hey, it does good for views, right?
It's not even that. I was like, how are you Bitcoin Maximalist if you're telling us like buy stock? Like I'm sorry.
It's true. It's very clear that in June, July of 2025, we had really sort of lost the plot. But a good little bear market will help you refocus. And now it seems as if we might be exiting this bear market. And of course, as you were just saying, the main reason is because the Treasury came out and said, we're going to start buybacking our debt and we're going to make sure that there's no problems at the long end of the curve. Well, when the Trump administration came in, there was a lot of hope that the adults were in the room, at least on the finance side, right? That Scott Bessent was this guy, a market master who was going to get in there and sort of fix our problems with the debt and the Treasury situation. We had Elon and Doge and all that sort of melted away. And we are back to square one where we're going to have to monetize the debt. Where do you see us in terms of a country, the debt situation, $40 trillion being surpassed, and what Bessent has to do right now?
So I was interviewed on Yahoo Finance yesterday. I wish I had the quotes in front of me because I had pulled them up in advance just in case I got a Bessent moment. And effectively 1 year ago, last week, he made this comment that he and President Trump were laser focused on paying down the debt, right? It's kind of the echoes of Doge and fiscal responsibility and all those. And then exactly a year and a day later, he just made the comment that, 40 trillion is kind of just a number. It's not that meaningful. And we are laser focused on growing our way out of the debt situation. So we went from, we need to pay this thing down. That's our main directive, which any reasonable person who has 4 brain cells and any understanding of economics would believe. And then you have the, oh shit, we're a uniparty and need to print our way out of any situation no matter what, which is what he later came to admit and understand in this situation. But very clear, the United States is in a debt spiral, right? Whether that is sustainable for 100 years or 200 years or 10 years, I have no idea. Markets can stay irrational longer than you can remain solvent. And I've been endlessly impressed with the levers and buttons that they can push to keep the party going. But 40 trillion is not just a rounding error. It's a serious number. When you go up $1 trillion in 5 months, we just had, I think, the worst deficit on a monthly basis ever, right? The train is only going in one direction, right? And nothing stops it, as Lynn Alden aptly points out. So I think Bessent now is saying what he has to say to prep everybody for a massive infusion of liquidity. Right. And listen, maybe AI can help them grow their way out of it, but nothing is stopping it, and rates have to come down and they need to refinance the debt at rates comparable to where it's currently financed and not multiple, percentage points higher. We're at a period now where I believe the debt is the largest line item on the budget, more than the military and entitlements and all of these things, and only growing. So you tell me how you grow your way out of that or how you handle that without just endlessly debasing your currency and hoping for the best. And by the way, that's how every great empire has ended. This will be no different one day.
Yeah, humans can't help themselves.
Yeah, humans are getting human, as I often like to say. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so we've had this brain trust of the Soros school in charge, right? We had Druckenmiller was on top of Bessent and Warsh back in the day.
People forget that he was their boss, even though he's over here like writing AI op-eds about how bad Bessent is handling the bond market. He was his boss.
So talk to us about that article that just came out yesterday from Druckenmiller saying that what Bessent is doing is bad. And do you think this is good cop, bad cop, kabuki theater? What's going on here?
No, I think Druckenmiller just is at a point in his life where he can say with or without AI exactly what he feels about what's happening, and people are going to listen. I should. By the way, as just a total aside, I don't know if you saw, but Druckenmiller bought a Hyperliquid Treasury company days before Donald Trump mentioned Hyperliquid in a random speech at the White House. So, I think there's a kind of a circle jerk here of cronyism, whether they agree or disagree on any given thing. I think we all know that, Wall Street and the government is a revolving door. And so I don't think it's kabuki theater. I think that what Druckenmiller is saying is obvious, right? I mean, intervention never works over time. It's a Band-Aid on a hole in the Titanic.
Yeah. And I mean, my question is, Bessent just came out this week and said that he's planning economic D-Day for Iran and is going to sanction any country that does any economic business with them, right? So are they doing all these moves in preparation for some crazy economic warfare that they're about to unleash?
Maybe, but I think they're just really good talking points. And I think that we have a incredible knack for wagging the dog, in the United States. And it's like, what? I'm not even a conspiracy theorist by any stretch, but you just assume when there's some huge announcement that there's something you should be looking for that they're trying to cover up, right? I mean, the Iran war, I've never been popular for my opinions on that in the Bitcoin crowd either, but it's nonsensical, right? I mean, the narrative has changed on any given day on why it's happening. And I think everybody's pretty tired of it. And so they're going to continue to try to justify the actions and what's happening there. But yes, I think all of it is just, whether it's intentional or not, are just catalysts for the future money printing that inevitably is going to have to come, whether that's to fund the Treasury buybacks, whether it's, to fund the government, whether it's to, fight off the debt, whether it's to fund foreign wars that we were not supposed to be in. All of that requires a whole lot of money that we don't have.
Yeah, that it does. And that's what makes Bitcoin shine so much in these moments. And let's talk about this move that we just saw, right? Because we were just flatlining around 62K for what felt like months. It was 2 months at least. And now we've had this strong move up. And many thought at first that it was just a short squeeze. But you had Matt Hogan on. And of course, he talks to lots of institutional investors. And he says the people that are coming in on this move are making a multi-year bet. This is not just some quick trade. What's your thoughts on that?
I agree with that. So it goes back to sort of the mechanics of any big move on Bitcoin that we talked about at the beginning, which is usually there's a spark and then there's leverage and then you see what happens, right? I'm highly encouraged that after that leverage was flushed once again, that we've stayed up, right? That doesn't mean we're not going back down, by the way. Like if I put on my trader hat, I started as a trader, charts and everything, I would say we're overheated and we should go back and test some levels. Go back to the low 70s, high 60s, scare people again, flush out the new enthusiastic longs, reset the market, and then push. You would need a little more fuel for the fire to push up. But I think that he's correct. And that's the point that's worth noting, is that you had the first move. So people bought when they saw the Bessent thing. Yes, then you get liquidations and the market is more about what's happening in the perpetual swaps than it is about spot. But then we saw our biggest week since the literal all-time high in ETF flows, right? I think it was 1.93 billion last week, 1.92, 1.93 billion into Bitcoin spot ETFs, of course, like additional into Ethereum and others, so writ large, almost $3 billion in flows, right? At 2.7, something like that. That is not trading money. Those people didn't pile into that trade buying the ETF because they were excited to buy at 75 and exit at 77, right? So I think that he's right, that the downside of the self-fulfilling prophecy of the 4-year cycle or the bear market was that people all of a sudden started waiting for this magic date or event for them to get the confidence that they could buy again, right? Well, it topped in October. And if we look in the past, it can't go up until October. So I have until October. Well, when does the market ever reward the crowd? So I think we preempted that, and the people who are smart said, well, I don't want to miss it. So buying at 76 or 77 here, if I'm willing to hold until 2027 or 8 or 9, is probably a better move than hoping I get to buy again in the 40s, right? Mm-hmm. Interestingly, on that same show, I had Matt Hogan in the morning on Friday, and he talked about that. And then I had my friend Jason Williams on the back half of the show going parabolic, who's like, the antithesis of Matt Hogan. And he said, I was wrong. Which you don't hear many people say very often. He said, I was short Bitcoin. He said, and by short Bitcoin, I don't mean with leverage. He means that I had converted, I'd sold a bunch. I was in cash. I was buying other things. I thought we were going lower, but I bought at 78 when it went back up because I don't care if it's 78 or 67. I think it's going way up for a very long time. Even if it comes back down, I'll keep buying. Right. And I think that reflects probably the view of a lot of people. They were waiting for the cycle to start. And now you have a big move on volume over key levels, and it's time to start thinking that might be the case. Sure, it could fake out, but something changed.
How many apps does it take to run your life on Bitcoin? One to buy, one to send, one for Lightning, and another for loans. That's a lot of friction. Rhino replaces all of them. Stay to the end, and I'll tell you how Rhino can set you up with $21 in free Bitcoin. Rhino is a next-generation Bitcoin app built for actually living on Bitcoin, not just holding it. Buy Bitcoin with zero fees. Borrow against your stack without selling it. Move money globally on Bitcoin rails in minutes, rather than a wire that takes days. Set a DCA plan so your stack keeps growing, whether the market is up, down, or you're out touching grass. Bill pay, cards, and Bitcoin retirement accounts are all on the way. And your Bitcoin is never rehypothecated, never lent out, and never touched by anyone other than you. Biometric protection, 24/7 fraud monitoring, and you can move to full self-custody whenever you're ready. It's your Bitcoin always. Download Rhino for iOS or Android at the link below and use code BitcoinNews. Deposit your first $100 USD and Rhino drops you $21 in free Bitcoin straight into your wallet. At Rhino, you get the most Bitcoin for your dollar. Yeah, there's definitely a huge vibe shift going on. And when it comes to the 4-year cycle, I mean, the proponents were so right for the last 10 months. Like Ben Cowan was spot on, like literally calling it.
I don't know why he gets so much shit for being the most right person like on planet Earth, but they can't handle it. And by the way, he's even said like, I would start buying. This is not the time to short anymore. Like it will ramp up. So even if he's quote unquote wrong because it's August and not October, he's right.
Yeah, he said the second half of the midterm year is when you start reaccumulating, and we are there, and he has been. So the one thing that he does bring up is that usually in a midterm year, there is a stock market correction come September, October between 10 to 20%. And if the stock market was to go down that much, do you think that Bitcoin could hold up?
I think it could hold up relative. So, but like, listen, what if we kind of chill here in the 70s for a while? And then the stock market kind of corrects and we pop back into the high 60s and people say it's over. That's still, to me, is healthy price action for Bitcoin, for the coming months. That said, like, history does not need to repeat. It doesn't even need to rhyme. I think he was right about the 4-year cycle. We'll see if the next cycle follows on the way up, right? I mean, to be right about the 4-year cycle, we're going to have to be right about it going up next time. So let's hope that he's right.
Yeah.
Because now anybody who wants to hate on him should be very much in his camp and supportive of the idea that we're going to go back up, right? But yeah, I think that Bitcoin has in history many times shown divergent strength. I'm a big fan of it being generally an uncorrelated asset. And I've said that for, decades, even as it sometimes takes a random walk in the park with not decades, obviously, for a decade, that takes a random walk in the park, with other assets. But you can't sometimes be gold and sometimes be stocks and sometimes not. That's just uncorrelated, right? And so like anyone, the correlation bros, I guess, who still continue to argue that if the stock market goes down, Bitcoin will have to go down. And how come Bitcoin was able to go down for the last 9 months while everything else went up? That's an uncorrelated asset. So yeah, it will be really convenient if it joins the party at some random time, but it's been uncorrelated largely for a very long time here. And I don't see that just because the stock market goes down that Bitcoin would have to drop with it.
And everybody talks about Bitcoin after it's gone up, but I think the real story of this summer is its resilience. All the negative news it's been able to shrug off. And the big news that hit our community so hard was, of course, the cold card exploit. Over $100 million worth of Bitcoin was swiped from people who thought that they had the most secure hardware wallet on the market. You've been very vocal in the aftermath of all this, saying, hey, I understand self-custody, but if you expect me to have an armed guard at my door just so I can keep my Bitcoin on a hardware wallet at home, this doesn't make sense. So what's your thinking when it comes to self-custody after all this?
I have had an armed guard at my door many times in my history and have had to travel with security and all of those things just because I'm a public person in this space and have had credible reason to do so. So first of all, this is not for everyone. And in hindsight, sometimes I question whether, the risk was worth the reward of being a public person in this space. I think at this point, it's probably a little bit better. But I think kind of what I alluded to was it's one thing to be your own bank. It's another thing to accept that being your own bank means also being your own bank security. Right. And I don't think that people realize until the increase in wrench attacks and the data breaches and all of those things, especially in France, that becomes a serious consideration, right? So I have mixed views now, being honest, on self-custody. So at the core, I obviously believe in self-custody, right? The problem is that I used to believe that self-custody eliminated counterparty risk, which was the reason to not keep your money on exchanges. And if your counterparty is Cold Card, who needs you to, roll magic dice 4,000 times to increase your entropy and get your magic Charizard or whatever the fuck they're doing over there, because I have no idea. That was so beyond me anyways. Or that like you buy a wallet and all of a sudden it comes with a criminal at the door with your data, your phone number, your address, and all of those things. You're trusting counterparties once again. And we had 250,000 people's data leaked in 1 week between Treasury, SafePal, and Bits of Gold, which I'd, by the way, never heard of, but apparently had 200,000 customers' data to leak, right? Nobody wants that, right? So I think that I hear people scream, and I would say the same thing, like, but multi-sig is still safe, right? And I use multi-sig, and like I have a, geographical scavenger hunt for my wife and kids if I die that they'll never probably accomplish because it's too complicated. Nobody wants to do that. I do it because I believe in it and because I have to take my safety very seriously, but nobody wants to do that, right? So like I can see the argument. I would never tell people to do it. I can see the argument with exchange security in 2026 versus what it was in 2017 or 18 when I started, right? If you're using a YubiKey and that YubiKey is stored somewhere and you have some sort of video face identification that's required for you to make a serious withdrawal, like things like that, and they could be an insured custodian. Like, I mean, Coinbase Prime is where the ETFs are basically custodying their assets. Is that better for you or the safe in your house? I don't know the answer, right? But I can see why people might debate that and kick it around, and decide what they want to do. And then there's the inevitable elephant in the room, which is that for people who think they believe in Bitcoin, but actually realize it's more about the number going up, why not just buy an ETF and call it a day? Right? So that's not what I want to do, but I can understand if someone's just like, I want Bitcoin to be 5 to 10% of my net worth because of the Sharpe ratio, which, by the way, Bitcoin maxis are telling them at the same time that they're screaming at them that they need to self-custody and it's freedom money, right? I think we just need a new PR department or something because I think it's very confusing to most people. And I could see how, as a new entrant into the space, you wouldn't want to touch self-custody. And I can't argue with the fact that you should. Like, I'm not sure you should from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think a lot of the purity tests of the last couple of years were buried over the last month. And one conclusion I've come to in the wake of all this is that maybe having all your Bitcoin in one basket is probably not the best decision. I believe completely in self-custody and that you should be able to move with your money at any time to any place. But at the same time, that existential just single point of failure that we saw in Cold Card made me rethink maybe splitting it up amongst different things might be the way to go. So
yeah, many reasonable conclusion. You can have some freedom money and you can have maybe some in an ETF and some on an exchange and some on another random wallet.
Yeah, it helps you.
That's a hard sales pitch. Yeah.
It is.
Grandma, should I get Bitcoin? Yes, but you should, put it in 3 multi-sigs, a one ledger, some on Coinbase custody, and then buy some IBIT, and you'll be fine.
It's a hard pitch. I agree. I completely agree. And that's my job, trying to get people to understand Bitcoin.
Same. It's like, listen, I've been shamed more times than most in this industry, but at this point, I'm humble enough to say either I was wrong or I don't know. And right now, when it comes to custody, there's times I was wrong, and I definitely don't know. Listen, I was one of Voyager's bigger creditors, so I don't know if I'm the guy to tell you where to store your Bitcoin.
Yeah, you only learn by getting burned, it seems like, in this world of Bitcoin and crypto. So the longer you can survive, the better. I guess that's the rule of the game here.
The saddest part is that, once again, like with FTX and others, inevitably the money is lost at the bottom. And then those people get to watch the price accelerate and they don't get to participate. It happens every time. It's terrible.
So then let's talk about your journey a bit, because, when you first came on the scene in the early 2020s, you talked a lot about altcoins. But this May, you put out a 9-minute video, your sort of Bitcoin manifesto, Why You Bitcoin. And I think it's one of the best short presentations to show to anyone as to why they should at least show interest in Bitcoin. Talk to us about the making of that video and your change of thinking around digital assets over the last couple of years.
I would love to say I had a plan, but that was more of a rant that went viral. It was the back half of a show on Yahoo, and we kind of said, scrap the news and just talk, right? So I had thought about it quite a bit, but we just kind of did it, and as you said, it sort of went viral. So I think that the reason that resonated with people was because it eliminated all the holier than thou maxi bullshitisms that we've been trying to sell people on for so long, the preaching. And I think I addressed how I felt and why I felt it. And I think that's why it resonated with people. So I can't say that I planned some grand thing to go viral and tell people why. I just told people why. At that moment, I was feeling it. And I think that resonates even stronger when we talk about Bessent and the bonds and the nonsense of fiscal and monetary policy. But at the core, kind of the story I told for those who missed it was, I'm almost 50. I'll be 50 this year. So I was there for the Great Recession, the Great Financial Crisis, and through all these. And I was a really slow learner, right? So I felt it the first time when the bailouts of the banks came. And I said, what the hell, man? Like, where is this money coming from? Oh, us, right? Why are none of these people in jail? And then you kind of forget about it. And then COVID happened and they print, 60 or 80% of all the money that's ever existed in the history of mankind in a matter of 18 months, right? And that's when it really hit. But mind you, I've already been and owned Bitcoin for 4 years at that point, right? So yeah, I said it and I talked about it. But to your point, I was kind of a trader. And I was really into altcoins and such as well. I still believed in Bitcoin, but that's when it really, really hit that this was fundamentally broken. So I was not a read the white paper and I get it guy. I was a lose a whole lot of money a bunch of times on a bunch of stupid ideas until I finally got it kind of guy. Like what you just said, I had to suffer it, and I had to suffer it multiple times. I wasn't even a one lesson kind of guy, right? And so for me, it's not, as much as it would pull my maximalism card, because I don't really identify there. It's not that I think altcoins are inherently bad at all. In fact, I still own some. I certainly own the dust of some from last cycles. And I can see why now, in a world where you can start to value them like a company or utility, that maybe you would invest in some. But I view Bitcoin as an entirely different market than altcoins. And I've been saying this for years. It's the same to me. I don't think you would, if you're a gold bug, I don't think you would have the same visceral reaction about someone buying NVIDIA stock as Bitcoiners do when someone buys Solana, right? Because they're just entirely different markets to me. And, so I can see the argument for some altcoins. That said, 99% of them were outright gratuitous scams. And I bought into it hook, line, and sinker because I was a part of the FOMO with everyone else. I bought a bunch of stuff. It's going to change the world. It went up massively. And by the way, I lost all the money, right? So I was wrong. The market proved me wrong. Price proved me wrong. My ideas proved me wrong. And I'm a strong believer in, strong opinions loosely held. If the market facts change, so does my opinion, no matter how high conviction I had. So I think that I've just come to the point where it's regardless of these things are scams or what this is or how you define any of it, the easiest thing for my personal situation and my lifestyle And for my belief that I want to rage against the machine in my own little way, just buy Bitcoin and chill. Like, first of all, as an investment, there's no AI stock I would rather buy at its current price than Bitcoin was at 65. Right? So Bitcoin at 60, take all of that out. Like, if I'm just an investor, like Bitcoin at 65 is like a 50% off discount in my mind while everything else is skyrocketing. So that seems obvious. So nothing else I'd want to buy. So I just buy Bitcoin. If I want to feel like I'm doing something other than what everybody else is doing and that I'm not buying into the system and the government and all those things, I buy Bitcoin because it makes me feel better. If I feel like things could go really bad in the future, even if I'm not a doomer and it's only a 0.1% chance, I want to know that I own Bitcoin so that I have an exit for it. So every part of me aligns with just buy Bitcoin and do nothing else, right? And listen, I'm a dad, like I work hard and I have 2 young kids and I have a wife and I love spending time with them. I value that much more than any asset that I own. And it happens to be that buying Bitcoin and not thinking about it aligns much better with all of that too. I don't need to stare at charts all day. I don't need to figure out if like I exited hype at the right price before it crashed, or if Zcash happened to have minted another billion tokens that I don't know about, or if I'm going to get exploited on some layer 1 that I've owned for 5 years because I forgot that nobody is literally doing security on that chain anymore, right? It's just so much easier to just buy Bitcoin and do nothing. And that's not because I think I'll make the most money on it. It's because it is my money and I don't need to think about it. Right? Yeah. So like once you start sort of denominating your life in Bitcoin or thinking about Bitcoin as your savings or as your money, it's what money is supposed to be, which is a place that you can store your time and your value and your energy, and it will still be there in 10 years as opposed to fighting against a tide of depreciation where you have to somehow become this professional investor just to keep up. Like the very notion, I think I said this in the rant. Honestly, I haven't watched it, so I don't remember what I said. But the notion that they're going to debase your currency, which is your time and your energy, at 3, 4, 5, 10% a year. So you need to somehow either get a second job as a professional investor to make 10% on what you have just so you don't lose money, or you have to pay somebody a percentage of everything you make, everything you've ever made, just so that they can do the job of trying to get you to keep up. And by the way, 75% of them underperform the S&P. So good luck finding an active manager who can actually do that job. And you realize I could just buy this one thing and zoom out because it's not going to, hold my value in a week necessarily. And my money will do what my money is supposed to do, which is that I can put it here and it'll be worth as much or more in 10 years when I need it. And by the way, that means eventually you might have to sell something. I hate to say that to people. It's okay. And so I think it took me a really long time to like have all of those conclusions consolidate and to realize that my time and energy were worth more than whatever effort I needed to make money. And I could just, denominate my kind of worth in this. And I mean my worth beyond even my financial worth, right? And denominate it in this one asset and go about the rest of my life. So just auto buy Bitcoin, chill, and call it a day. That was a very long-winded way to answer your question. I'm sorry, but you made me think about it again.
That was awesome. That was another grade A rant, my friend. Great job there. And I want to thank you for your work in this space. The conviction that you've showed in this bear market, you were very clear saying, oh, this is a great buy. Like I'm happy to pick up Bitcoin at 60K. Like you guys are crazy if you think this is scary. And I think that conviction is so palpable from someone who truly believes it, like you. And you are reaching a lot of people these days. You've got a show on Yahoo Finance. You stream all the time. You've got huge guests. And I think that you're reaching a lot of people outside of the Bitcoin maximalist circles. And for them to get a breath of your conviction in Bitcoin after years of being in this space, I think is doing a whole lot for the space. And any Bitcoiners who have crap to talk about you, I'm not about it.
Listen, I've earned some of it, right? Like if you signed up for Voyager because I kept saying that I was keeping my money on Voyager, it's my mistake. But unfortunately, in a world where you actually share what you're doing and you're wrong, people might lose money. So I don't begrudge anybody who looks back at past behavior and says, wow, I wouldn't want to follow that. It's so funny. You'll go on X, like I don't block. There was a time where I had like all these people blocked. I unblocked everybody I ever had blocked on X years ago, but every once in a while I'll go to respond to a tweet and it's like blanked out and I'm like, oh, this person has me blocked. And I'm like, what are you gonna do? And it happens actually quite regularly, and it's funny. But I think people can change, and I think people not even change. I think you just evolve, And like I think I'm very transparent about the fact that like I came in for very different reasons and doing very different things than I'm doing now, right? And so I would just encourage, not me specifically, but like people change, so give people a chance and listen to what they're saying and see what they're doing now, right? And so my like entire ethos is mainstream adoption of Bitcoin, right? I talk about stable coins and I cover the whole industry, but I never tell people to really buy anything other than Bitcoin. And like you said, very vocally telling people to buy Bitcoin in the 60s with very high conviction, even if it goes down, and so now luckily I have the audience or the mouthpiece where I can continue saying it. And I say, and I'm pretty gratuitous about it. I was on Yahoo Finance yesterday, not on my show. They had me on randomly as a guest. And she was kind of like, well, it's never getting back to 125,000, so how do you tell people? And I was like, 125,000 is a pit stop to 1 million and 5 million 10. She was like, really? Yeah, yes. So I luckily can reach. I'm not saying I love the idea that Bitcoin Maximalists would follow me or that people who've been crypto forever would listen. I welcome all, but that's not who my content is for anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But my content is for new people who are thinking about it and who are in the mainstream and maybe just want to start with 2% of their money in Bitcoin. I think that's fine. And I'm not going to yell at them about their custody. And I'm not going to do all those things I did in the past. I'm just trying to get them in, and educate them that we're here.
Well, you're certainly reaching a lot of people. What the impetus of this conversation we're having right now was the fact that I was at my mom's house in New Jersey, and on her Amazon Alexa, there was a ad for your show. And the question on the bottom was, what is better, Bitcoin or gold? Right. And so you're reaching all these boomers on their Amazon Alexas. Go figure.
I'm not doing it by telling them that they're stupid for owning gold.
There you go. There you go. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, one person that you do platform a lot who says you're stupid for owning Bitcoin is Mike McGlone, right? He is a Bloomberg analyst, and he's been calling for $10,000 Bitcoin for a long time now, throughout this whole entire bear market. You have him on once a week. Has any of his arguments ever resonated with you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Which is if you think that every show that you watch should delicately protect your very delicate echo chamber, I'm sorry. I'm not for you. I actually like the contrarian opinions, and I like to listen to other people's opinions, even if I vehemently disagree with them. People are always like, how do you still have them on the show? I'm like, because A, it makes for great arguments, and B, it'll keep you all grounded, even if you think it's stupid, right? That things can happen. But Mike is generally right. I say this about Schiff too, actually, who I've quote unquote platformed quite a bit. If you eliminate the word Bitcoin from your arguments with Peter Schiff, you'll find you agree on 99.9% of things. The only place you stumble is at the finish line as to which asset to own because of the behavior of the government and institutions that you agree on, right? So I think that Mike has incredible knowledge of markets, more in his pinky nail than I will have in my entire body for the rest of my life, from the trading pits and decades. And I think that he's right mostly about the way things should be happening in the economy. He's just wrong, in my opinion, about where Bitcoin fits into it. That's it, And so, I think there's a lot of valuable lessons in someone who's been here forever, who's watched every cycle, who's seen every boom and bust, who can tell you about debt to GDP and stock market and all these, metrics and why there should be a correction and all these things. I just kind of tune out the Bitcoin part at this point because I've listened, I've absorbed, and I disagree. And, if it goes to 10 grand, who knows? I mean, listen, he's been very right since 126, but he was also very wrong on the way up, continuing to say it would go down, right? So, but he's been right about a lot of things. He nailed oil, when everyone was screaming for $150 oil, he was saying, $60-$50. He nailed the top of silver, like a lot of these other things. I just don't think he really gets Bitcoin at this point. The funny thing is I met Mike when we were co-guests on a panel, CoinDesk or something like that. It had to be 7 or 8 years ago. And he was the biggest Bitcoin bull ever. And in the face of mainstream hate for the asset. So he was on the, people don't remember, he was the contrarian side on mainstream media pushing Bitcoin up. He's the guy who proposed the Bloomberg Galaxy Crypto Index. You know, like the reason we even hear about Bitcoin and stuff on Bloomberg is because of him and his bullishness for a very long time. And listen, it's not like just Bitcoin. He's also really bearish on gold, which he was very bullish on for the last multiple decades. You know, so I think he's a very, very valuable voice. I think that, you know, he's just become like the WWE heel of the industry, you know, him and Schiff, and maybe he plays into that a little bit. You know, and it suits him, but I will continue to have him on because I think he has incredible knowledge and a very valuable opinion.
I agree with pretty much everything you just said there, and he is a good sport about it, right? He gets a lot of
beating, like
yeah. Dave Weisberger is constantly taking the whip to him, but he.
The funny thing is, you know, like they kind of made some bets on the show over the years, and Dave big time won the first one. I don't remember what it was, how high Bitcoin would go or something. But then a year and a half ago, Mike said they were looking at the Bitcoin to gold ratio. And Mike said, I'll bet you in a year that, you know, gold has outperformed Bitcoin. And we all thought he was literally insane. And he smashed that bet. Smashed it. You know, gold annihilated Bitcoin from that point on. So it's not like he's been totally wrong.
Yes. Well, another guest you've had on your show recently is Jeff Booth. And from the conversation, it sounds like you guys have talked a bunch and could be considered friends. And when you talk to Jeff, it's very clear that he has a completely different outlook on Bitcoin and the world's financial markets than the average person, right? And it does seem as if you've sort of reached this level of zen when it comes to Bitcoin. You know, you don't want to trade anymore. You're happy to accumulate at low prices, and you have full faith that this thing is going to work out in the end. For the average person who hasn't been exposed to Jeff's worth, how would you explain his worldview to the average person?
God, I would be remiss to even do it. I would say just read the book. It doesn't take very long and it will change your life. The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth is one of the books that sent me very much down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, but more because I understood, once again, the problems with monetary and fiscal policy. And really, he really illuminates how corrupt and broken the current system is, and he makes it so obvious. And it's without talking about Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin may have been the final conclusion, but it's a rounding error in page count in the book, right? And so I think, you know, Jeff's main idea, obviously, is that deflation causes abundance, which flies in the face of everything that you could ever learn in an economics textbook or from watching, but that the entire point of the system is to debase your currency, steal your time, and steal your money. And, you know, he uses great examples, obviously, through technology. And I think that right now, when you watch what's happening with AI, it becomes more abundantly clear how right he is. But, you know, he often talks about, like, you know, look at the price of TVs or computers, right? How much those things cost for a much simpler version of it. But as obviously the technology improved, the price naturally came down. And if you were living in a system where your currency held its value, you know, what would have cost you 10 Bitcoin is 1 Bitcoin or whatever, you know? And so look at your iPhone, right? He talks about it a lot in the book. Like, you used to own a calculator and own a flashlight and own all these things. Now it's all in one simple, relatively cheap device when you consider everything you're getting. And the price of that device should naturally come down if you were living in a system without inflation and without currency debasement. So all I can say is read it. And the world will make so much more sense to you. And you'll probably, your natural inclination will be to fight the instinct to agree with it. But with time, it will be impossible to ignore. And maybe or maybe not, you'll come to Bitcoin as the conclusion to it. But I think more importantly, just understanding the system. See, I had read the book, and then, like, in the context of all that COVID and everything that we talked about before, it was just the perfect timing for me as I've continued to reread it and go over it. And then more conversations with him. But yeah, he was one of the first people saying to me, like, Scott, like, we're not friends yet, but what you're doing is wrong. And he like, very calmly, you know, because Jeff's not going to preach you. You need to take your own path. He'd be like, you don't want to be exposed to all these things. Like, you're taking on extra risk with chasing yield with your assets, like blah, blah, blah. And he watched it happen. And then I would go to him and say, you were right. And we'd have another conversation. And, he's like the Zen, the most calm, non-judgmental human being in the world. And he just watched it happen and kind of talked me through it over time. It's, you just got to read the book.
Got to read the book. It came out in 21, I believe, Price of Tomorrow. And in it, he mentions AI. And now we're finally living in this explosion of artificial intelligence. From your look as both a trader and a user, how are you seeing AI in the back half of 26?
Well, I don't even know how to handicap it as a trader, to be quite honest. So all I know is that they're going to spend a shit ton of money to build it out. So it would be hard to call it dead now. I think the market is interesting, right? There was this week not that long ago where both Meta and Microsoft reported earnings, and they both had this extreme increase in CapEx spending on AI, which a lot of people like Jordy Visser are pointing as kind of the new money printing and stimulus, right? Just from private companies instead of public entities, which I think is interesting framing. But Microsoft went up massively and Meta went down massively. And the reason was because Microsoft was more infrastructure, and I think the market could justify the CapEx spending. And Meta was more like, we're building this out and we'll see what happens. And the market didn't really see the immediate result in the expenditure and punish the stock. So I think kind of actually reminds me of previous crypto cycles where something could just go up just because there was a narrative. And now it's starting to price actual utility or want to see the value or see what this thing does or why it should go up. I think AI is becoming that way. So maybe I'll have to be a bit more selective. Listen, the market crash never seems to come, right? So I don't want to be the guy who says AI bubble ends tomorrow. Once again, markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain insolvent. So I don't think it's going to crash soon. All I will say is when it does, it's going to be a spectacular explosion. Not in a good way, but there will be a time when there's so much froth and overvalue that it absolutely collapses. But right now, it seems like all the attention is there. As for as a user, I think it's the most incredible technology that I've ever seen in a lifetime, rivals the internet. And I think that the ways that, and I'm a boomer kind of in this world, so I don't really get it still. Everybody's out here vibe coding, apps and stuff. And I'm trying to use it like a Google search. But it changes your life and it makes your life easier, which means it frees up more time and money to do other things, which kind of reminds me of Bitcoin in certain ways. And it kind of, once again, reiterates the point of the price of tomorrow, which is that your life should be made easier and cheaper by technology so that you have more freedom, time, and money to do other things.
100%. And when you just mentioned Jordy Visser, of course, his big thesis right now is that AI brings infinite abundance, whether it's intelligence or eventually material goods. And in reflection, you need a scarce asset like Bitcoin. So how do you see AI and Bitcoin playing out together?
I really like his ideas around it. I hope he's right. I think the more natural marriage between AI and blockchain technology, obviously, which underlying Bitcoin that came from Bitcoin, will initially probably be AI agents spending stable coins on crypto rails. Just because I don't think AI agents are going to do microtransactions back and forth in Bitcoin immediately, right? But I think that maybe it will become the same way that a human perhaps interacts with crypto, right? Which is Bitcoin is your savings account. It's how you sort of denominate. But when you want to go spend money, maybe you use stable coins as your rapidly exploding fiat that you need to get out of your hands before they burn, And so maybe those very same agents will, accumulate their money in Bitcoin and then spend it in stable coins because it's, faster, cheaper, and easier when denominated in dollars. But the very thesis that in a world of abundance, you need something scarce to store value makes perfect sense. And in a digital world, what is scarce and stores value better than Bitcoin? Nothing. So yeah, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, let's hope these clankers are smart enough to realize that Bitcoin is the best money, right?
You got a program, right? So.
Well, it's funny because Silicon Valley, they seem to be sort of, I don't want to say anti-Bitcoin, but they're definitely not pro-Bitcoin, right? And it's interesting. What do you think about that?
Well, I think they're technologists, right? And so I think that there's a natural inclination towards the new shiny thing. in Silicon Valley, right? AI is the new shiny thing. I think they even view Bitcoin kind of like as the old granddad, and it's not exciting enough and there's not enough innovation on it. And so therefore they kind of write it off. I mean, you see like the All In podcast guys or, BitTensor and Solana and all these things, whatever. Great. Okay. But those are the things they get. I think it just makes a lot more sense to them than I also don't think they're probably excited about gold.
Yeah.
Right. Even when it goes from 2,000 to 4,000 or 5,000. Right. I think that it's kind of a dismissive, whatever, that's boomer rocks sort of thing. And sadly, for better or for worse, I think Bitcoin's become like the boomer thing for people who go beyond Bitcoin and, believe in crypto and all this other stuff. So I think that it won't really matter what they think if the AI agents actually decide to adopt Bitcoin for, its scarce properties. I also think that most of those guys probably quietly own a lot of Bitcoin.
Chamath definitely does.
Yeah, I think there was a point where he owned like 5% of the supply or something. I don't know what the number was, but it was, yeah.
Yeah, he got it early on for sure. But the chase of yield and big numbers, I think got him away from Bitcoin.
Built for like building and entering and exiting, and I think it's just in their very DNA. So I don't begrudge them that. I think that it's just not that exciting for them.
Yeah, I think Silicon Valley could probably benefit for some lessons in Austrian economics, but let's see what gets them there. Maybe this inflation will.
Maybe.
Well, in the last few minutes of this interview, I want to take it a little bit personal because I think that actually your journey and my journey sort of mirror each other in some ways. Before you were in media, you were a DJ. I had a band, one in Shanghai, China, and then played some music in New York as well. And then you transitioned into doing this YouTube stuff and podcasting. What skills did you learn in DJing that helped you with this career you have now?
It's funny. I get this question quite often. And so beyond even DJing, I used to sit around produce music all day. Right. So I was in Ableton or Pro Tools or Logic, whatever it was, Fruity Loops back in the day, Acid. I don't know if you remember all these platforms, and so there was this natural thing where you were interacting with the software, using different plugins and stuff. And for some reason, when I got into trading initially, kind of crypto and otherwise, looking at charts was very familiar to me from looking at the software for producing music. For some reason, the creativity of it and finding things and patterns just resonated exceptionally well from music. I don't know if that makes any sense. I don't know if it makes any sense to anyone else, but it makes sense to me, right? And so I think that was a huge part of it, was that I could recognize the patterns, and more importantly, if I got into it, I could sit there endlessly, 1,000 charts and draw the lines and try to find the things, and so that was the first kind of catch for me, really. As weird as that is, I don't know why, but it felt familiar and felt like something I could spend hours doing. I mean, there may be more lessons to it, but that was definitely the first.
Yeah, I mean, so much of life and intelligence is pattern recognition, and music, seeing it all laid out in Logic or Ableton, it definitely makes you recognize those patterns faster, and I'm sure it translates to charts. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to me. And then when it comes to building out this business that you've had now, a career in media, a lot of people are trying to start personal brands and become their own mini Wolf of all streets. What advice do you have for people starting off in the personal brand ecosystem?
Interestingly, I wish that I could say avoid making all the mistakes that I made in the past, but everyone's going to make them on their own anyways, I would say, though, that you need to be hyper-focused on, you can't be everything to everyone. And so I think that finding what you're really passionate about and going all in on it, doubling and tripling down on that thing, no breaks, showing up all the time and always being there regardless of how tired you are or what the market's showing you or what you're busy with. I think that is how you have a chance to break through. I can't say you necessarily will, but you have to define what you are and then decide what kind of content would resonate with people, then test it. And then just be willing to put in the hours, days, years before it catches on. Like it was it's not easy. I would love to say that I did any of that. I just threw stuff at the wall and took a good 9 years to get to where I am. And none of it was with any major intention. But I think that now with AI and with, the amount of social media and the different places that you can gain exposure, if you have a plan, first of all, your content also has to just resonate. I won't say it has to be good because I don't know what good or bad is, but somebody has to think it's good. So if you're making shitty content, even if you're very dedicated and doing it all the time, it's still shitty content, right? So, but I would say that you need to define what you are, kind of wake up with that mission statement every day, how to, back yourself into making sure that you deliver that message to however big your audience is, whether it's one person or 1 million people, and be confident that if you keep showing up, that it'll continue to grow from there. Like I said, most of the things that have happened, most things I've built were kind of by happenstance or chance or luck or whatever you want to call it. I can't say that I planned to have a show on Yahoo Finance, right? It wasn't in my plans at all. It happened.
No, but luck favors those who prepare, right? Yeah. And part of the preparation is showing up every single day.
Work hard.
Yeah, you got to work hard. And have fun with it. I think you make a good point. If you're not enjoying it, you're never going to make it.
And everybody's going to know that. That's the thing is you can't fake passion for very long. I'm sure you can in the short term, but
but you've got it. And you show up every single day, you stream, you do podcasts, you're tweeting away, and you're obviously having fun doing this on a very big stage. So Scott, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, man. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And if people want to find out more, just plug yourself, please.
At Scott Melker on X, you'll find everything else there. I've got the Daily Wolf on Yahoo Finance every day at noon. Of course, my YouTube channel. It'd be hard not to find me if you go searching. We're doing a lot.
There you have it. All right. Well, hopefully get you back on when Bitcoin is reaching new all-time highs.
So next week.
Next week, yes. All right. I'll see you then. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this interview. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, leave us a comment, and tell us your favorite part. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you know every single time that we drop a new one. If you want to dive deeper, check out the interview we just had with Jeffrey Tucker, libertarian and economist who has gone deep into the Fauci files, understanding what went on between 2020 and 2022 at the highest levels of our government and the NIH when everything was just going absolutely insane. Really interesting interview. I'll see you over there.